Hello and welcome to the Lifestyle Dentist, where healthy, wealthy, generous dentists choose to live epic lives on their terms with freedom and fulfillment. I'm your host, Dr. Garth Hatch, and super excited for our guest today, Karan Narang. And he is an expert in short-term rentals. He's got a very cool background. We're excited to dive into that more, but he really lives the lifestyle freedom where he can travel with his family, live anywhere he wants, and run his short-term rentals. And very neat insights on the short-term rentals too, because I'm a big fan of investing in real estate, both for income and tax advantage strategies. And there's different ways you can do that. But a lot of professionals, including dentists, if their spouse is not a real estate professional, are kind of capped on some of the tax benefits they can get. But with the short-term rentals, there's ways to really open that up, and Karan's going to go more in depth with that. So with that said, Karan, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Garth. Really appreciate you having me on the show. You know, I've been in this short-term rental, vacation rental space for about 5 years now, give or take. And when I started getting into this, I'll say, asset class in real estate investing, I had no guidance. Resources were very limited. And honestly, my starting in this space got delayed by a couple of years because I had a CPA who told me I was crazy and I had no resources to really go find the right people to get some guidance.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to be here today and to share with your audience how they might be able to use this advanced strategy to try and save on taxes and as well, make some really good cash flow with short-term rentals and vacation rentals. So
Awesome.
Thank you for having me here.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, and I've followed you for a while. We're in a similar business mastery group that we're in, and you have done so many different things. You have got courses with short-term rentals, help manage short-term rentals. And so just to take a step back, Karan, maybe give us a little bit of background about yourself, where you're from, growing up. Did you always want to be a real estate professional? What's your background?
It's a good question. I came to the US a little over 20 years ago. I grew up in India. I came to the US just like everybody else as an immigrant, came here, went to college, did my master's, all that.
What was your master's in?
Business. I did my MBA. Yeah.
Awesome. Good for you.
And
Yeah.
So coming here and, I spent the first 10 years of my life essentially figuring out 10 years of my life here, figuring out, my whole visa and immigration. Today, luckily, I'm a US citizen, so that makes things way easier for me. But, just going through the motions of trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
Literally had no money till like 2009. We bought our first property back then. This was our primary residence in New Jersey. And, fast forward to 2017, moved down to Texas and became a rental owner by default because I rented out the property that we owned in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Along the way, I had shifted careers. I'd worked a lot, so done a lot of consulting when I first came here. Shifted and went and joined a startup, and I all of a sudden, 2012, 2014, I started making a good amount of money, and at the same time, just like all of the other high income professionals, started paying a lot in taxes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's when, around about 2017, 2018, I was at the peak of, my taxes. I was paying a lot of taxes. I was doing a lot of different things. And I started looking for ways to save on taxes. I knew deep within me that there was a way that you could save taxes on short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down this path of trying to find these investments. I mean, I purely got into it for tax savings purpose. As everyone says you should not do, right? You don't let the tax tail wag the dog. But that's exactly what I did because I was sick and tired of paying taxes. And I did come really close to getting into short-term rentals early on. I actually started my first true investment journey with a long-term rental.
Mm-hmm.
And then very soon I realized that the long-term rental does not allow me to shelter my W-2 taxes, right? I became aware of the fact that W-2 taxes, W-2 paycheck, is the money you earn there is your highest tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And it became very clear to me that with a single family investment or a multifamily investment, because I was not a real estate professional, I couldn't shelter my W-2 income.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I did not have that much passive income to really go shelter it with real estate investments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Along the way, somewhere there, I kept digging deeper and deeper and got educated on the whole short-term rental loophole. where you could buy a short-term rental, not be a real estate professional, and still write off your W-2 taxes with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately pivoted my entire investment strategy to go to short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
Now it so happened that this was I switched and pivoted into short-term rentals, and literally as soon as I got my first couple of bookings, I'm like, this is crazy. My long-term rentals are making a few $100s each, and if I had to go replace like a hot water heater, my cash flow for the year is gone.
Right.
All that work, all that time, and I'm like, I can't take the tax write-off. A few $100s a door doesn't get me too far, and here I'm trying to build generational wealth. Not working for me, right? And I came, as an immigrant, didn't come with money,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to start from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I pivoted into short-term rentals. And when I saw the success I had with short-term rentals, the first property I bought and the success I had, I said I got to double down.
Yeah.
A few months later, I quadrupled it down.
Just curious, what year was that, and where was that first property you bought?
So the very first short-term rental property I bought was 2021.
Yeah.
And this was actually, it was, like COVID timing, right? So
Sure.
boom, everything's hitting off really well. Now, again, people were finding it hard to buy good properties at the time.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was finding some good deals.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm going all in.
Yeah.
So I bought a couple a few months later, like 5 months after I bought the first couple.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did cash out refis and I bought more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Along the way, somewhere in me, there was this whole philosophy of, I need to mitigate my risk a little bit. I still bought a couple long-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
I converted them to mid-term rentals, furnished rentals.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using the same systems and processes for mid-term and short-term. Now, actually, I've even gotten rid of those mid-term rentals. I only own one now. And I've just gone into short-term rental because that's what I'm good at. That's where, honestly, I'm seeing it becoming truly life-changing for me. And you mentioned this a little bit. I have since, in the last 3 years of investing in these short-term rentals, grown a portfolio that is sizable enough to be able to give up my full-time W-2 job that I quit in December, and now I'm in it full-time, and this is what I do for a living now.
That's so cool. And I see your posts with your beautiful family traveling all over and living an amazing lifestyle while you're working. Yeah, that's amazing. That's pretty cool. Curious, just with the short-term rentals and the mid-term rentals, and I do have some short-term rentals, one in Maui and one in Cabo San Lucas, and we can get more into that. But I've never done mid-term rentals. I've heard of it, as far as that concept. Their house burns down or something like that, or they have a flood, and so they need to stay somewhere with the insurance in a midterm. What does that typically look like, and what are the pros and cons with midterm rentals?
So yes, midterm rentals are good if you are in a market, and there's a lot of regulations coming up. So there's several markets. For example, I live in a town that only allows 30-day minimums.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have one midterm rental left. It's in my town. And the reason I hold on to it is because I do see the long-term potential and increase in the value of the property. And it's here to stay, and it's going to keep growing. And I think, the value of the property is going to double in 5 years. Okay. So I hang on to it.
Mm-hmm.
The pros of the midterm rental are that typically I cash flow about double of what I would as a long-term, if not more. Okay.
Wow, that's still
So
good.
as a furnished rental, it allows me to cash flow significantly higher than as a long-term rental.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The pro of it is the cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of helps me make sense of keeping this property.
Mm-hmm.
The con of it is that it becomes the type of person who comes there. Many times you run into the issue where in their mind, they've rented an Airbnb because they usually find you on a short-term rental platform and whatever. Yeah. And their mindset, even though they're staying there for a longer period of time, they're expecting it to be more like a hotel or like a short-term rental, where they don't need to worry about replacing the light bulb or the tank is you have a ghost flush. If you rent out the property long-term to someone, they kind of take ownership in it and they say, okay, you know what, I'll change the light bulb. I don't have to call the landlord for everything.
Yes.
So this is now a person who's staying for 60, 90 days and expects to be treated like you would at a short-term rental. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't tell my guests at my short-term rental to go change a light bulb. We just do it at the next changeover. When the guest leaves, we'll go replace it. Yeah. In a long-term rental or even a mid-term rental,
Mhm.
I kind of expect, you're living there.
Mhm.
You could change a light bulb.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you see, you're kind of stuck in that in between zone
Yeah.
where you have now someone for multiple months and
Mhm.
they expect to be treated like it is a short term rental. So
Mhm.
there's this little confusion in between that you
Yeah.
now have to deal with.
That
But
makes sense.
yeah, it's still, if you have a long term rental and it seems like it's a decent location, then yeah, if it's not making too much money as a long term rental, it can be. You should evaluate to see if it can be a midterm rental. It's a
Mhm.
good space to be. I've rented out several times to insurance companies, relocation people. Our town, for example, properties don't stay on the market too long. Days on market is very short.
Mhm.
And for people wanting to come and buy a property here, if they're not here locally and can't go see the property this weekend, but
Mhm.
next weekend it's properly under contract. So it's too
Wow.
late. They
Wow.
can't fly
Right.
in. So that's
Mhm.
where, we get a lot of people who are relocating to the area wanting to come and stay for a little bit of time
Mhm.
so that they can look for the property, or there's, people have, water leaks and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's okay. Given a choice, it wouldn't be my first preference
Yeah. Yeah.
because I'm also kind of spoiled because I know that if it's a short-term rental,
Mhm.
you can be a difficult guest, but you're going to be gone on Monday.
Right.
So, I'll be okay with that.
You can keep the
With a
rabbit for a
midterm
week.
rental, yeah. So midterm rentals is kind of, like the in between. You're
Yeah.
stuck and you're doing it because, it kind of helps justify holding on to the property for the long term.
That does make sense. Just one other follow up on that too. I'm curious, with advertising, do you primarily advertise online, or do you contact you mentioned the insurance companies, do you contact the insurance companies directly, or how does that usually work for the one you have?
Yeah, really good question. So we have a list. So insurance companies don't rent out these properties directly.
Mhm.
So they typically work with relocation companies. There's relocation companies that specialize in finding temporary housing for people who've been affected by these sort of events.
Mhm.
Okay. So the insurance company, based on the value of your property and the premiums you've been paying,
Mhm.
let's say you had this issue happen, they typically say, okay, this person's property is worth X dollars. These are the premiums we've collected over the years. This allows us to pay out 30,000 for his housing portion of the claim.
Mhm.
So they then typically will put this out to bid with the relocation companies. And they basically put it out and say, we've got an open bid. You can bid on this. Find us a property that our claimant can go stay.
Mhm.
And these relocation companies bid on them. And
Mhm.
many times I'll get the same request from multiple relocation companies
Mhm.
because they're like all trying to get that same business.
That makes
And
sense.
they keep a little margin in between. But
Mhm.
that's their business. They've developed these relationships with the insurance companies and with the landlords of the property. So
Mhm.
we typically work with the relocation companies. A lot of them will book like the first month on Airbnb and then go direct
Mhm.
because if it's an extension, typically everyone thinks, hey, my renovation from the water leak is going to be done in 20 days. I know from personal experience that's not happening. They're going to
Yeah.
be here for 6 months.
Yeah.
So
Minimum. Yeah.
so then we typically will do that first month booked on Airbnb and then it goes direct most times.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Awesome. Okay. No, that makes sense. And then with the short-term rentals that you're primarily doing now, tell me about that transition. What really was the light bulb to say, wow, this is much better when you were doing that transition?
Literally the first property and the first 2 weeks it went live,
Mhm.
it just so happened that my timing of going live with that property was before spring break.
Mhm.
And as soon as I saw those bookings come in, I went right back and bought a second one. And it was crazy,
You were
just
hooked.
that whole transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went all in. The cash flow had me convinced in the first couple of weeks, and I was like, okay, I'm going all in here. And again, what's happened is because I come from this consulting background, I was primarily my day job was working in pharmaceutical supply chain and consulting.
Mhm.
I've always worked with big companies and putting in place all the processes and the systems. My goal from day one was that I don't want to build another job, and I implemented the processes and systems. Now, having all those processes and systems already in place, having good success with the first couple properties, I'm like, I should just add more to it,
Mhm.
and I can scale because I already have everything in place.
Mhm.
So that's what really pushed me there. After the first year, I was convinced, you know what, that's the way to do it. And I sold off a couple long term rentals. I did some 1031 exchanges, and I moved all pretty much into short term rental now.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Just the process and systems, and I don't want that to go unnoticed, because I do agree, in any business, having good processes and systems is going to really help to be able to make it scalable, where you go from having a job to a business. What are some, I guess, things that could apply for a dentist or any professional, some good ideas on processes and systems that people should take into account to make their business more of a business, not a job?
Yeah, you know what's a little crazy is I know a lot of people who have short-term rentals. I'm in that space, so I know a lot of people who have them. What happens is people jump into the first one and the second one and the third one without implementing those processes and systems in place.
Mm-hmm.
By the time they get to the third one, they're like, this is another day job. Because again, everyone talks about mailbox money. There is no mailbox money. Okay. Everyone's got to work for it. There's nothing like, hey, I'm sitting home and I'm getting the money. Somewhere or at some point, you're going to have to work for it. And I find, and this is where, I'll touch upon our coaching a little bit.
Yeah.
So I offer a program called Vacation Rental Mastery.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between just investing in a vacation rental or a short term rental and mastering it is the fact that when you master it, you're actually having the ability to scale infinitely, right? You want to be able to keep growing that business. You're truly mastering that process. And that's where all these systems and processes come in place.
Mm-hmm.
80% of our business today is automated.
Wow.
As you also spoke about earlier, I take several trips a year with the family.
Yes.
We're gone a lot, and even then, I can have $100,000 a month without me being present, without me doing anything,
Wow.
right? And that's the goal. Just anyone can go buy a short-term rental. Anyone can go buy a vacation rental.
Mm-hmm.
You can do all the due diligence around it, but are you truly putting in place those sustainable processes and systems
Mm-hmm.
that will allow you to scale to a point where you can truly achieve these freedoms?
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of high net worth individuals, high income professionals, doctors, dentists, radiologists, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're making, $500,000 a year or north of $500,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
one short term rental is not going to let you go enjoy those freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
Two, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Four, probably not,
Mm-hmm.
right? However, you'll need to scale to 8 to 10 units, and then you might be like, hey, okay, maybe I can go part-time, I can switch my career, I can do something different, I can free up my time just go enjoy with friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
However, most people, by the time they get to that 5 or 6 rentals that'll allow them to do that, they've built another day job because they don't have those systems in place and the processes. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a catch-22. So
Sure.
that's why most people who come, and work with me on the coaching, it's not like, hey, help me buy a short-term rental or help me buy a vacation rental. It's more, help me build in this whole business that allows me to scale without giving up more of my time, without giving up this time I could spend with my friends and family. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where those processes and systems come into play.
Mm-hmm. No, and that makes sense. And I'm sure it would probably take you hours to go over the full big picture, but as far as just kind of a rough sketch, is it using virtual assistants? Is it using AI? It's different software. Like what big picture? What would that look like?
So all of the above. So I use virtual assistants, I use AI, I use several online portals that all help me automate the processes. AI, even 3 years ago, when I started, AI was kind of non-existent in our space.
Mm-hmm.
But lately, a lot of new things are coming up, and this is where, if we didn't have the basic processes and systems in place, if we didn't have the SOPs already defined, standard operating procedures defined for a lot of these,
Mm-hmm.
it would be near impossible for me to bring in AI to help out with it.
Mm-hmm.
So the foundational aspects need to be in place,
Mm-hmm.
and then you mature your business over a period of time by bringing in things like AI into the picture. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've got virtual assistants in the Philippines who help me run the business, and I use AI,
Mm-hmm.
and we use the technology and a number of different platforms to make that happen, to make this business run smoothly. So it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. They need to speak to each other, they need to work together.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, what I'm working on is getting AI embedded into the business to a point where I can scale my business even faster without necessarily adding in new headcount.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Ultimately,
no.
that's where the world's going. That's where we're going.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And as far as I know, because again, having short-term rental, our one in Maui, different story, just because they had the fire in Maui, and so
Yeah, yeah.
that one was doing well. They had the fire, and we still do have a on-site property manager, is how it's worded. They're not a
Hmm.
full property management company, because in Hawaii it's 25 to 30% of the gross rents, which is crazy. I mean, it's hard to get it to cash flow with that high of a property management fee. But so we have a bit of a hybrid where we have an on-site property manager that we pay about $500 a month flat fee, and then we handle the Airbnb, VRBO bookings ourselves, take those phone calls, but they're the on-site person that they can handle if there's a leak or need to send a repairman or whatever. They handle those kind of things and those phone calls. And it was working really well. Then they had the fire. Then there was nothing for weeks, where they pretty much shut it down, and it was just vacant almost, most of the time, besides some bookings that were already there in place. And then it even when it opened up again, it was still much slower, maybe probably 80 to 90% down. I think Maui wide, as far as the bookings, there's
Yeah,
much fewer. And there's different reasons for that. First, the government says nobody come to Maui because we can't handle you, and then all these people start getting laid off for their jobs because their whole income and
yeah,
economy is around tourism. And then they switch their tune of, oh, hey, please come to Maui to support the people in Maui. So now we ended up, if there's a FEMA program that we're actually doing with that right now for 18 months. We'll see how that changes next year. But right now we're renting it as a FEMA, that they're basically paying most of close to our Airbnb fees for the month, which is working pretty good right now. Hopefully it's not trashed by the time they move out.
yeah.
But I guess with that in mind, I know there was a big boost of short-term rentals post COVID. People want to get out. Supposedly, there's a bit of more of a dip nationwide or worldwide this last year or two, but some markets are still doing really good. What have you seen as far as with that, as far as the short term rental market in 2024?
Yeah, so I agree. There are certainly some markets that are not doing good. And I have a couple of those too. Again, let's be honest, right?
Mhm,
When you have a portfolio of properties, there's always going to be some that are not going to do well. Now, luckily for us, because we've committed ourselves, right?
mhm,
We committed ourselves to building a portfolio. I have as a portfolio, so think about stocks, okay?
mhm,
Think
mhm,
about the risk you would face if you only had one and it wasn't doing well.
mhm,
If you don't commit and say, I'm going to build my portfolio or diversify a little bit, then you stand the risk of losing money if you just have one or two in one location, right?
mhm,
So
mhm,
we are seeing dips at some of our properties, and we also manage for other people. So we are seeing some markets not do well, and we are seeing markets that are doing really well.
mhm,
Our personal portfolio as a whole is doing really well because we've got some properties and markets that are doing really well. And what I've gotten to a point now that we're up to 10 properties of our own, I've gotten to a point where I look at it as a portfolio and I say, what are my lowest performing properties? I will identify the bottom two and I will sell them. I'll do a
mhm,
1031 exchange, and my goal is to try and replicate, to go to the highest level, the ones that are performing really well. What locations are they in? What kind of properties are they in? Can I unlock my equity from those bottom two and
mhm,
shift them up higher up? So
mhm,
essentially, what you're doing is, over a period of time, you're building what I would call like a performance ladder, right? You're
mhm.
taking that bottom and you're moving it to the top, and you're slowly just weeding out the bottom too.
Yes,
And that's really what the goal is.
that sounds great. No, that's a great idea. And that helps to continue to balance. And I'm sure that may change if you did that, even look at least every year, every 2 years, whatever, and see where it's at, and can continue to scale up and get rid of those that aren't performing as well. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, as far as the tax strategy, and again, most people listening to this are dentists, or at least professionals, where they do high income earners. They're somewhat tapped on being able to free up those passive losses for their income, unless their spouse is considered a real estate professional, which
right.
some of our clients do. Their spouse is a real estate professional, so they're able to get that. Me included. My spouse is considered a real estate professional, so we've been able to do that. but some can't. Their spouse may be making really good money themselves as another dentist or a CPA or computer analyst or something like that. So how does that work? Where with a short-term rental, the tax is a little bit different, where they can maximize their write-offs.
Yeah, so really interesting. So most of the clients we work with in our coaching program are essentially high income professionals who are looking to lower their tax burden. Okay. The way it works is there is what they call the short term rental loophole. Okay. The short term rental loophole essentially, I'm trying to keep this short and not too technical. What it says is that if you have a rental property where the average length of stay is 7 days or less, and if you materially participate in that property, in the operations of that property, that activity, that I'll call it business or rental activity, is considered non passive. By default, the IRS considers all real estate investment passive. Okay. If I'm going to buy a single family home, rent it out for a year, it's passive. I get a passive loss and I can write it off. However, if you have a short term rental and you are essentially materially participating in the property and the average length of stay is 7 days or less, you can actually make that a non passive loss or be able to write it off against your active or W 2 income.
That makes sense.
Now, you combine that with the strategy of doing the accelerated depreciation, which for people who don't know is there was a law passed by Trump when he was in office where he said that he would allow you to take depreciation or accelerate your depreciation. All real estate investments get depreciation. However, he said we can accelerate the depreciation of all 1, 5, 10, and 15-year property. And to simplify that thought, the age of your roof is more than the age of your floors in your home, right? So when you look at this, they depreciate differently. And as long as you can prove to the IRS through what we call a cost segregation study that they're depreciating at different times and the value associated with it, you can take that depreciation in the year that you place it in service. So if you buy it this year and you rent it out this year, you can take and write off all of that in this year. Now, again, it's gone down to 60% of it. But again, that's the general principle that as long as you buy it, get it in service this year, do a cost segregation study, and self-manage it this year only. In the year that you place it in service, you just manage it yourself versus giving it to a property manager. You can write off your W-2 income. Yeah. So that's huge tax savings for high income earners. This morning I was on a call, with a coaching client of mine. He's in the 37% tax bracket. So he's essentially lowering his AGI at the highest tax bracket. That's huge tax savings.
Yes. Yeah, especially when they're paying, it could be $100,000-$300,000 a year or more, sometimes where they're just really getting hit hard on tax. So yeah, that's real savings that they can use for investments and other things like that, pay off debt. So yeah, no, that's huge.
Yeah, we did the math today on a property, about $1 million property, $900,000 property, at the 37% tax bracket, he'd save somewhere about $50,000 to $60,000 in actual taxes.
Yeah, that's real savings. I mean, if you're able to do that every year and you invested that money and even got an 8% return, I mean, you're talking millions over time. So yeah, that's fantastic.
I mean, it is the strategy I use to scale. I did this. I did the cost segregation, took my tax break. You combine the tax savings along with the cash flow from the first properties, add in a little more, and go buy 2 more. Right? It becomes so much easier to grow your portfolio.
Yeah. Question on this, and I know you don't have a crystal ball. I don't either, and neither of us are CPAs or in Congress. But supposedly there's talk that in Congress they were going to try and reintroduce the accelerated depreciation, where you could take it all 100% the first year, and it had support both with Republicans and Democrats. But I don't know. It sounds like that's kind of got installed. I don't know if with the election if that's going to happen or not. Have you heard anything different on that?
Everything I'm hearing is saying it's not going to happen before the elections, and I don't expect it to happen, man. So I again, as much as I pray and I hope it happens, at this point I'll be thankful if it happens in 2025. Sure. The way I look at it is, even the 60% we're at right now,
Mm-hmm.
It's totally worth it. I
Sure.
mean, that's still a huge amount of savings. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
now, yes, some of us got spoiled with 100% tax savings a few years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't have that anymore, but we'll settle for 60.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Considering saving $50,000 to $60,000 on one property and
Yeah,
buying something that's already an asset too, that's going to go up in value, that's going to
right.
appreciate. You get all the benefits of appreciation, depreciation, somebody else paying down your mortgage and increasing your wealth that way. So yeah, 100%. That's it, so many
And,
benefits.
when you combine, just think about it. Leave the depreciation thing, leave the tax write-off thing, leave the appreciation because that's not in your hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
market determines a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you just took in the fact that at today's interest rates, you can still get a 10, 12, 15, 20% cash on cash return on a short term rental that is acquired the right way, on a vacation rental that's acquired the right way and operated the right way, that's already a win. Because
Mm-hmm.
today you can't find a multifamily at 8% interest rates. You can't find a multifamily that's cash flowing really well. You
Mm-hmm.
can't find a single family home. Single family homes are the hardest hit with the interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to cash flow. What are you going to cash flow? A couple $100 a door. The minute you got to go replace a hot water heater, you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so
So
true. And just big picture with the short-term rental, I get the way it qualifies is essentially you're running a small hotel and it's more of a like an active business, correct? Is that the way the IRS looks at it, or how does
it's
that qualify?
no, not an active business. The minute you start offering more, so let's say if you said I'm going to include breakfast every morning, I'm going to include daily cleaning. Now you're operating a hotel.
Okay.
Now it becomes an active business that shows up on, for the people who are tax savvy, that shows up on your Schedule C, which is active.
Mm-hmm.
Now what happens is if you're actually making money, you have to start paying like self-employment taxes and all that stuff on the active side.
Mm-hmm.
This is essentially still on the passive side on Schedule E. Please, again, I'm not a tax professional. It's what I've
Sure.
learned over the years.
Sure.
You're still able to write it off because it's still on Schedule E, and you can still claim as a non-passive activity. So I'm literally, I would still not call it a hotel. I
Mm-hmm.
would call it literally, it's real estate investment that's non-passive.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Actively managed real estate investment. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
As far as with the different markets that you've looked at, say I'm a dentist. I don't own any real rental real estate, at least not short-term rental real estate. And I'm interested, and I say, "Hey, Karan, I'd really love to do this. I've got probably going to have a big tax bill this year. How do I go about it? How do I start looking for different markets? Do you say just stay close to home? Do you look at there's like AirDNA? There's different
Mhm.
softwares you can look at to see where markets are good. How would you go about helping somebody with their first property?
So great question. I've got I typically when I do my coaching, I coach maybe 3 or 4 people at the same time, and that's the first question that they ask me. What markets are we going in?
Mm-hmm.
So I usually start with the markets that I have experience in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the markets I've already been in, I either own properties or manage properties in the markets. I think we're at about in 15 different markets right now. And I
Mm-hmm.
can clearly tell you, and this morning I did a comparison between the Gulf Coast in Florida versus the Atlantic Coast in Florida, right? And I can show you numbers on both sides with similar investments and their performance. So I typically will first look at my experience, the properties
Mm-hmm.
I'm managing, the locations I'm managing, either my properties or others, and make a recommendation. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's first go to.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I use all the tools. I use AirDNA, I use STR Insights, I use Airbnb directly. I'll go look at several properties in the area and I'll compare, hey, what do their calendars look like and what do their pricing look like? Actually, VRBO is even better because it shows you all the pricing in a nice little calendar right there on the bottom. So,
Mm-hmm.
you can use these platforms to truly gauge what those markets are doing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I use the data from STR Insights and AirDNA. However, what I've found is that this data, in my opinion, because I will also run a litmus test, so I'll compare what data they're showing versus what my properties are actually doing. and I'll usually see a variance.
Mhm.
These platforms give you a lot of valuable insights into the performance of these properties in different markets. However, don't go with it as a science.
Mhm.
Don't look at it and say, AirDNA says my occupancy is going to be 70% or 80%.
Mhm.
No, sorry. Listen, that's giving you a base level to start, a starting point.
Mhm.
After that, you got to layer in things like uh, a realtor who knows and understands the local market,
Mhm.
historical performance of properties in that market, because many times, if it is a good short-term rental market, there are other properties that are short-term rentals in that market.
Yeah.
And if it's for sale, you can absolutely ask your realtor to get you information or historical information on the performance.
Mhm.
Then you have to apply, self-managed versus a property manager, and then you can kind of gauge. And honestly, when we do the math, at least my approach,
Mhm.
I'm not looking to say it's going to make 150,000 and have it be like a science, 150,000. This is where short-term rentals are very different from other real estate, right?
Mhm.
Let's say you buy commercial space. You generally know that if I have a warehouse, I can rent out my warehouse in this location for approximately X dollars per square foot. That's clear.
Mhm.
You might deviate a dollar here, a dollar there, but you're not going to deviate 20% from what the market's telling you. If you have a
Mhm.
multifamily, you know that the going rate for a two-bedroom apartment in that market is X. Maybe you put in some high-end finishes and maybe it's a couple of $100 more. You're not going to be 50% off or 30% off, right?
Mhm.
Generally, you know
Mhm.
it. In a short-term rental, unlike all of these other asset classes, you unfortunately need to apply and use some of what I call subjective intelligence.
Mhm.
It's not very clearly defined. You can't find signs, and you have to kind of project out what it could possibly make. Just
Mhm.
because it's making 80,000 right now, and AirDNA says it's only going to do 90,000, doesn't mean you can't make it do 110,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So the
Yeah.
variation, the variability is much higher in short-term rentals.
Mhm.
And I always say it's all about the property,
Mhm.
what you make out of it,
Mhm.
and how you run it. That's going to
Mhm.
determine how much you're going to make, right?
Yeah, that
You can
makes
take
sense.
a complete dog off a property and you
Mhm.
can turn that around depending on
Mhm.
how far you're willing to go, right?
Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
why, while I use all these other tools, I have to layer in. I can't just stop at the tools. I have to layer in my experience. I have to layer in my network. So I reach out to the realtors I've worked with in the past or my network of realtors. I
Mhm.
speak with them and get their opinion on things and how things are doing well. I'll speak to some local property managers. All
Mhm.
of this combined together allows me to say it's a good investment or a bad investment. And I could still
Mhm.
be wrong, right? So that's
Sure, sure. None of us have a crystal ball, right?
exactly. So
Right.
it's a lot more complicated and
Mhm.
actually makes my job as a coach a lot harder because
Uh-huh.
most of my clients will be, oh, AirDNA is saying I can only do 80,000.
Yeah.
Okay, but listen, you know what? This is everything, all the factors that I've layered in,
Mhm.
and this is how we can do things differently. So a little more complicated, and obviously the risk is a little higher, variability is a little higher, but
Sure.
you know,
No, and that makes sense. Well, and I think that's like any business, you could have two businesses in the same town, same strip of beach or whatever, and one is much better at marketing. They've got a better team on the ground with their network. They can advertise better. They can turn the rooms over. They've got higher reviews, and vice versa. Somebody that's down the street that doesn't do it well, doesn't market well, they're not very responsive to the guests, and so yeah, have totally different experiences. Have you found in general you've been able to get higher rates than the AirDNA or lower rates or about what the AirDNA is typically for their estimates?
I'm typically fighting with the numbers because I'm usually doing much higher than AirDNA. And,
Good.
where I think you might appreciate this is on the lending side. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So these days, DSCR, debt
Mm-hmm.
service coverage ratio loans have become very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you go and use a DSCR loan, they have
Hey,
guidelines.
Karan, I know what they are, but just so people that don't know what a DSCR loan, can you kind of explain what that is?
Yes, a DSCR loan is essentially a loan where the lender lends you money based on your credit score, but the ability of the property to pay for itself. So that whole discussion around debt to income ratio, or it showing up on your personal credit report and all that stuff, all that goes out the window, right? All they care about is that the property is able to generate enough income to pay for itself. Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah.
As a rule of thumb, when you use a debt service coverage ratio loan in multifamily or single family, it's easier for them to project the income because there's historical rent rolls they ask for. They ask for historical, hey, give me T12, show me all the rent rolls for the last 12 months. And they say, okay, you know what? We've got long-term leases and it shows that this person pays $1,200 a month. Okay, we can count that in as part of income of the property. With short-term rentals, there is no rent roll. Even if you may have historical data, they're likely not going to use your historical data, right? They're going to say, I'm going to look up, and what they have picked, at least a couple of lenders that I have spoken to about this recently, they use AirDNA. AirDNA has kind of become the de facto standard for what they use. I often find that AirDNA does not project out the revenue the way we are able to perform. So that doesn't work in my favor on the lending side because they're using AirDNA, and AirDNA projections come up lower than the way we're actually doing. I actually had this discussion with a lender to help me with a cash out refi on a short-term rental. The projection, as per the cash out refi, said my property would only do $220,000 a year. I showed him my actual reports from my system. We actually did over $400,000 a year on that property. And I said, here's my actual report from my system, and I can give you the detail behind every booking and every number there. And here's what AirDNA says. They're different. And he says, unfortunately, the way our lending processes are written is we have to use AirDNA. So there's a little bit of a drawback there. One of these days, they'll find a way. The thing is, again, the federal regulations for lenders do not allow them. They basically force them to use some sort of a third-party system to come up with what that revenue looks like, and they're forced to use AirDNA. So that's what I found recently. I learned something new every day, and this was one of the things. I'm like, okay, you know what? Based on this performance, so what I did was I said, hey, it's $400,000 we did last year. Based on this performance, what would you value my property at? He's like, no, I need to go by AirDNA.
Yeah. Which is frustrating when you can show them, hey, this is what I'm doing right now. I mean, live, which is pretty cool.
But we just navigate that as needed.
Yeah. But kudos to you. That's showing you're doing things right. You're doing a really good job at managing your properties, which is fantastic.
Thank you.
On that note, as far as what's some of the challenges with short-term rentals, and I know in particular, I'm thinking about, okay, you need good cleaners, you need somebody local that's going to be able to turn it around to handle when they call and say, hey, my faucet's not turning on, or the handle's broken, whatever. How are you managing that, or recommend people handle those and things they should probably look into even before they buy a property?
Man, it's pretty tricky. Some parts of it are pretty tricky. I'll give you an example. We're dealing with one client of mine now who's having like this horrible neighbor. The horrible neighbor syndrome, okay? Where the neighbor is making his life difficult in running a short-term rental, okay? That's always an issue. Yes, you need to have a good team, good crew on the ground, be able to help you manage, especially if you have larger properties that sleep 20, 25 people, which is the kind I like, to be honest with you. You need the right team in place. And if you are truly thinking of scaling your portfolio even remotely, then you do need to spend that time and effort on the systems and processes, right? What I always tell most of my clients when I'm coaching them is, we could do everything just right. We could find the best properties. We can, project the revenue really well. We can do all our due diligence. But, just like every other investment out there, there's an element of it that is not in our control. We cannot always project and be right 100% of the time, but we can always be prepared 100% of the time. So that's, to me, you're going to face those challenges. There is no mailbox money. Forget about that. there is effort, and if people are looking to get into this space and thinking, hey, I'm just going to just sit back and enjoy the returns come, yeah, you can give it to a property manager who can handle it for you, and you can probably do that. However, note that it's not going to be without some involvement from your end.
Hmm.
And in my mind, I look at it and think, yeah, I could put my money in a syndication and be kind of hands off. But in recent days, you're hearing a lot of these syndicators who are in trouble, right, with their
Hmm.
multifamily
Hmm.
portfolios and commercial
Hmm.
portfolios and things like that. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to go down, I want to know I give it 100% chance of
Hmm.
success. And
Hmm.
and if I put it in syndication, I'm actually giving that chance to someone else to make it right,
Hmm.
make things work.
Yes.
If I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down fighting and know that I
Yes.
put in everything I possibly could to actually win versus
Hmm.
just sit there and hope that someone else does that for me. So, yeah, it is a complicated business. It takes time and effort, takes a lot
Hmm.
of energy. But at least with short term rentals and vacation rentals, I feel like the returns justify that time, effort, and energy you're going to put in.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And for me, with our two, you've got a lot more than I do, but ours in Maui and Cabo, I think that's one of the biggest factors that determined why I even bought in that area was I knew someone that was really good in the area that could manage it, because otherwise there's just so many factors that can happen where somebody quits, that you have somebody lined up and then they're not doing a good job, and that can be stressful when you're 1,000 miles away or more and they're not doing what needs to be done, and yet you may have to hire somebody else and pay them a lot more money. And so yeah, I think that's so critical to have a good local team, be that handyman or cleaners or even a family member, whatever, somebody that you could call, that a friend that know and trust, to even be a backup if something happened. So I do agree with that. So yeah.
And
and
the
and
way I look at it is, even on the worst day of
Mhm.
running a short term rental, I
Mhm.
think it perform at least or better than a long term rental for me. So,
Mhm.
yeah, the effort's higher, but just like
Mhm.
any other business,
Mhm.
it is a business that you're going to run.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. No, and that's a good point too. If you have the right systems in place, it can work anywhere. And the other huge benefit that I saw, as far as from a lifestyle factor, is I can go to Maui as a business expense. I can fly to Cabo for a week, and
Yeah,
my family we need to go stay in the condo. If it's, and I'm not a CPA again, so don't quote me, but my understanding, up to 2 weeks a year in both locations. And yeah, we'll go and we'll do a little painting or tighten up some
yeah.
screws or whatever, make sure everything's doing okay. But the rest of the time, I can be surfing and eating fish tacos and enjoying life. And it's a business expense when we go visit the short term rentals.
I a long time ago I heard this podcast. I'm not even sure where it was. They called it the sandwich method. Okay,
Mhm.
you meet with a realtor on Friday and you meet with a realtor on Monday to go expand your portfolio, and you can enjoy the weekend in between, and you can write off the whole trip.
Yes.
It's
So
called the
it
sandwich.
it definitely, well, and it gets back to, like Tom Wheelwright says, with he wrote the book Tax Free Wealth, by Tom Wheelwright. He says, if you want to change your tax, change your facts.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so there's different ways you can make your vacations write-offs if you're creative, if you plan ahead. you know
correct, correct.
so
Yeah.
little different topic, but there's a lot of different issues right now going on where some cities are changing their regulations on short-term rentals. We're dealing with that in Maui right now. We bought our condo. It was already approved, county approved, everything as a short-term rental. Now Hawaii, across the board, they're looking at possibly changing that. They've done some changes in Oahu, which there's still going to be a lot of legal battles, because many feel that's unconstitutional, because people bought those properties based on the fact that they were already approved for
Yeah.
Airbnb and short-term rentals. But what's your thoughts on that? And also, do you prefer buying in an area where they've already established certain laws on short-term rentals, or would you prefer to go to somewhere that doesn't have any laws currently?
So you touched upon the two places I'd go, right?
Mhm.
Either they got to have some really well defined regulations, or they got to have no regulation whatsoever, not on the horizon. I will stay away from that middle ground stuff. I don't want that gray area. I know that, people will go and buy properties in areas where there's pending legislation. I don't want that. I don't want any of that. I have, that's just you're putting in too much at risk
Mm-hmm.
by trying to do that, by trying to guess
Mm-hmm.
which way it's going to go. And
Mm-hmm.
I would rather not do either of those. I just go and pick one that is complete wild wild west, or one that's completely well defined.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can meet those regulations as long as you know what the regulations are. You can meet them. Or if there's
Mm-hmm.
no regulations, that's fine. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're praying and hoping that this regulation won't pass, or will pass your way, or change this way, forget it. I mean, I stay
Mm-hmm.
away from all of that.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And we're getting close on time. I want to respect your time, but I did have a couple final questions just to help the audience. You have done so much, and both with your consulting, with your short-term rentals, and you're obviously a very astute businessman, very very successful. How do you balance your time with being productive, managing yourself so that you can manage your business, but also have time with your family, enjoy your travel, everything else? What are some things that you've done to help find that time balance?
Yeah, so for me, what I try real hard, and again, my family is in Italy right now. They're going to be there through the rest of the summer. So, you know
That's
what?
awesome.
They're not here. So, obviously, my time balance is kind of off quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
However, when they're here, I try a lot during the school year, where I start work at 8 a.m. after my kids have gone to school. I stop work at about 3 p.m. Or at least I try real hard to stop at about 3 p.m. because that's when they come back.
Mhm,
And then I can take them off and do whatever's needed at home. Um, I try to balance it out. What I'm trying real hard is to operationalize my business, my actual running of my short term rentals and manage and the property management stuff, operationalize it to a point, automate it to a point where it takes very little time for me. And it does.
mhm,
We're already kind of at that point. I've had several trips I've taken in the last couple of years where my teams handled 99% of the work. I even
mhm,
managed a full blown 100,000 plus renovation from afar, from being halfway around the world, right?
mhm,
And I,
mhm,
I didn't spend like 6 hours a day on the phone, right? It was maybe an hour here, an hour there, whatever it was.
mhm,
So
mhm,
it's gotten that part of the business has gotten really automated and operationalized, so I can look away from it and let
mhm,
it run.
mhm,
Where I love to spend a lot of my time, which I do a lot now, is I spend my time a lot on coaching
mhm,
and on creating content for my podcast, for the course, for doing all of
mhm,
that, because I'm at that point where I'm looking to make a bigger impact.
mhm,
And if you listen to my
mhm.
podcast, which is called Vacation Rental Mastery, I
Yes.
talk about the five freedoms. Okay,
Mhm,
you got time freedom, location freedom, relationship freedom,
mhm,
impact freedom, and financial freedom.
mhm,
Financial freedom essentially helps everything else kind of grease the wheels to get them moving smooth and fast. Okay,
mhm, mhm,
but the area that I'm really focused on right now is that impact freedom. I want to create the biggest impact possible. Okay, it
mhm,
comes from my own personal experience where when I wanted to get into short term rentals, I had nobody guiding me, nobody coaching me, nobody telling me what to do, how to do, where to go, how to navigate, right?
mhm,
And that
mhm,
kind of slowed up my speed of getting where I
mhm,
wanted today. I said,
mhm,
I can't let this happen. And that's why I've been coaching now for a few years. So I spent a lot
mhm,
of time there. And
mhm,
I've taken that impact freedom, the impact I want to create
mhm,
across the community, across the people I know, to the
mhm,
next level by launching the Vacation Rental Mastery program and the
mhm,
podcast. So I spend a lot
mhm,
of my time there now because what
mhm,
I realize is that the bigger the impact I can create, the
mhm,
faster people can actually go and achieve these freedoms themselves. So
mhm,
that's where I spend a lot of my time now. So
mhm,
it's essentially vacation rental mastery, my property management, and my own business, and most of that is operationalized. So I got plenty of time now because I don't have a W-2 job anymore. So I can
mhm,
wake up today and say, hey, do I want to get on a call with Garth? Yeah, okay, let's have that call today. Or do I
mhm,
want to go, drive to one of my properties? Yeah. Or you know what? Do I want to just lay in bed, watch Netflix or whatever? Oh, that doesn't happen very much, by the way. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I wouldn't think so with all you're doing, but no, but that's beautiful that you have the opportunity. You have
yeah.
control of your own destiny, and I love that. Really, to me, I think that is freedom. I mean, money is just a number, but really, it's worthless in and of itself, it's what money can do for you. Can
Okay.
it buy that freedom? Can it buy time with your family? Can it buy time to take care of your health? It's what the money can do. And so that really, and ultimately all of that comes down to, in my opinion, fulfillment and freedom,
Oh
so
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
you probably notice I put it at the very end of my five freedoms because
Hmm.
to me it facilitates everything else. The others are your basic human needs. Everyone's looking for time with friends and family. Everyone's looking to, not have to be in front of their office desk, in front of that desk or behind a counter at 9 a.m. every day, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's not what humans are made for. We're not robots, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
everyone's looking for these things. And what makes it happen, don't get me wrong, I want to make a lot of money so that I
Hmm.
can go get a lot more of each of one of the other freedoms. But if you said, hey,
Hmm.
you can have all these other freedoms unlimited, then
Hmm.
money, the value of money goes down quite a bit. So that's
Hmm.
where, you use those to facilitate all the other freedoms. That's when you're truly winning.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Karan, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time and the information you've shared. If people want to get a hold of you and go deeper, either with your course or coaching or anything else, how could people reach out to you?
Yeah, so the easiest one is all the common social networks. I'm on Facebook. You can just look me up at Karan Narang, send me a message. I haven't gotten to a point in my program and stuff where I don't respond to them myself.
Hmm.
And, again, or you can go check out our program on vacationrentalmastery.com, or you can
Hmm.
look at the podcast called Vacation Rental Mastery. And either one of these places, you'll find an easy way to contact me. And yeah, this is what I really enjoy doing. So feel free to reach out. You don't have to be a client. You don't have to do anything. You would just say, "Hey, I'm interested in having a conversation around it. I'm evaluating this stuff, and I will give you everything you need to really think about it." One of the things I'll offer your listeners as well is, I've published a free ebook that they can download that gives them the
Hmm.
whole step-by-step process of getting into vacation rentals. And if they
Awesome.
just go to vacationrentalmastery.com/ebook, they'd be able to download that.
Fantastic. No, thank you. And yeah, we can put that in the show notes too, so people can look it up. So
Yeah.
wonderful. Karan, thank you so much, my friend. That was awesome. Look forward to spending some time more with you, either at one of your amazing short-term rentals or one of mine, or just anywhere where we can connect and have some fun. So best wishes and best wishes to your family in Italy. Where are they at in Italy, by the way? Where are they staying right now for the summer?
They're about 30 minutes outside of Monaco, Monte Carlo, and
Oh, wow.
they're on the Italian border. It's spectacular. I'll be going back in a couple of weeks, but actually next
That's
weekend,
awesome.
not this weekend, the next.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be fun.
Oh, that's yeah. When I was in the military, I was stationed in Germany, and we loved going down to Italy, the Cinque Terre area, and went further down south near Sicily, and but yeah, the whole area is just
Yeah,
beautiful,
it's essentially called
Mediterranean.
the Italian Riviera, right there on the
Yeah,
bottom by Nice.
yeah. Oh, that's a nice area. I know Monte Carlo. I know that's where what more billionaires than
Yeah,
just anywhere in the world. It's a nice area. So
yeah.
fantastic. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us. We'll put that information in the show notes. And best wishes, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks, Garth.
Thanks so much, Karan.